this is coming in. It's always gotta, tap in after so long. I trust y'all doing well, taking care of yourself in this eclipse season. And speaking of eclipse season, you know how important it is to take care of our hygiene as we move through certain energetic portals. And just paying attention in general to, the effects of, different planetary transits and things of this nature. I realized like the downloads that was coming in from like just the little recent, short videos I dropped, like in connection with Saturn energy. I'm like feeling like, dang, it's so much focus on like understanding Saturn. And when I thought of it, and I say thought of it, but like it showed up to me like, hey, this is connected to the whole little Saturn retrograde and kind of going back into Pisces before it moved forward. And Pisces deals with like that, deeper awareness, ancestors, but ancestors from a perspective of like, like understanding, like you can almost say like understanding our subconscious connection or the foundation. So like this Saturnian things that have been coming to me is like the foundation of Saturn, because you also see like it is also connected to like, learning about the planets in that sense. I learned about these archetypes, you feel me? But it was like, all right, the whole little Saturn retrograde and Pisces energy was like coming up in these downloads about Saturn, like seeing the connection of, the 0 point, even gravity. And you think of the 0 point, the middle of the torus field. The torus field has a bunch of, rings of energy and the rings of Saturn. Then also seeing the 0 point being like, all right, the middle of a torus field. And you see how the middle of a torus field is also like a black hole, drawing things into it. And that also gets into centripetal force when you talk about physics. And Dan Winters kind of talks a lot about the whole thing about gravity and the connection with centripetal force, you know. So that's something, if you want to do further little research, what I'm saying, that's somebody that also kind of goes in on the science of it and also has an awareness of the certain mythologies too, because I feel like both science and the spiritual aspect, in order to have a true holistic view of things, it has to come together, because in essence, that's how a lot of clinical psychology be kind of missing the point. Is like they regard spiritual phenomena as completely like, oh, that's just, spiritual phenomena, and, that's woo-woo, or, what I'm saying? And hence why a lot of people who are a little more, adept or, more researched in that area, they're gonna like consider looking at a lot of Carl Jung's work, what I'm saying? Because it ties into, the dream aspect, the spiritual aspect, what I'm saying? So, but before I get off, but as I was just running it again, like the science, that's what I was talking about, like the science connecting with the spiritual aspect. And so you see, like, again, the black hole, the gravity, and I was also paying attention to how most anime always got this character who connected to gravity in certain ways, and the anime Eden Zero, what I'm saying? Eden Zero, Eden, like the Garden of Eden, and Zero, the 0 point, and the main character could manipulate gravity, it's, all of that. He was raised by this kind of android type of being, and lived in a city with nothing but androids, it goes deep, but uh, you got the Eden Zero connection. Again, Interstellar. That was also like a thing. I'm like Interstellar, and I came across another show. Speaking of robots, I forgot the name of it, but it was on Amazon, and it had importance or significance to Saturn too. And I just noticed like the way it depicted Saturn was like, Saturn with like the lights around the the sphere, and then the lights kind of glowing around the ring, so to speak. And I'm like, man, this looks exactly like how they depicted the black hole on, Interstellar, you know. And of course, now with watching movies, you do have to be aware of the curveballs and stuff like that, because it could be in a movie just to kind of throw you off in essence. But what stops it from being, from being like, oh, I don't know, it's like, well, but I'm also looking at the mythologies and the different aspects of it. So I know that it does have some aspect of like the 0 point, or being in the middle, or a black hole, or centripetal force. The cosmology video I did, it was basically the Note Sessions number 9 video on Patreon, of like the cosmology and how Saturn is the center of attention, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? And tying it also to the body with the spleen, and the spleen being representing the Saturn energy in the center, you know, and the spleen connected to, red blood cell production in certain ways. But, it's a bunch of stuff, and I'll have another video on that, but just, lightly touching on that's been coming up, because that's also connecting to, certain levels of our ancestry as well, like looking at our connection to the Saturnian energy, because again, that has it's a very key factor, when it comes to, being a melanated being, having a melanated bodysuit, or what quote unquote people call black. But again, I don't use that terminology, because I see how, it's melanated people all across the world, and it's deeper than just the melanated beings in the United States. Because I feel like when you use the word black, it's kind of only like, the United States. That's what the black people say. Everybody else is like, African, Indian, this and that. That's, like all these different nationalities. But ultimately, I just use the word melanated, because it just kind of, covers all the ground, and it allows for it to be spoken on from a more scientific perspective, and not just like a social, political type of thing. You know what I'm saying? But that's coming up. That's another reason why the whole Saturn thing coming up, because again, Saturn not only dealing with karma, or it has like a grandparent or elder type of energy, you know what I'm saying? That old person that's like, back in our day, we used to do it like this, you know what I'm saying? That's kind of like that Saturn energy, uh, and then again, Pisces, that's like your grandparents, you know what I'm saying, ancestors. But particularly like grandparents is what your 12th house or Pisces point to, you know what I'm saying, your elders on that level. So a lot of that energy in essence is like, coming up to the forefront, and you may find yourself finding, a better awareness of, how to have that closer relationship with, your ancestors on, on whatever level's best, but also always understanding that mainly, your ancestors are within you, It reminds me of that Juneteenth event that I recently did, and, when they asked me, like, what Juneteenth means to me, or what, being free, or, being free, your ancestors, and like, what Juneteenth means to me. And, just genuinely it came up of like, it's not so much about like the romanticizing of, you know, the ancestors this, the ancestors that, like externally, but it's like more so just seeing that like my I honor my ancestors every moment that I do my best to be the greatest version of myself in the moment. Like in this now moment, when I honor my now moment, I'm honoring my ancestors because I'm appreciating, you know, the the energy of being free, as free as possible, as you continuously climb that ladder of sovereignty and being free, like enjoying the level of being free, right now, you're not just like say for instance, like if you just kind of like quote unquote not doing anything, you know, healthy for yourself and not being a a healthy energy to your environment, that's almost like just, letting what those before you, like all the things that those before you did to make sure that you were straight, it's almost like just washing it down the drain or throwing it down the drain if you ain't like doing, you know, something to, honor your presence and your being, because again, like your presence and your being exists because of those that came before you, and quite literally, as I make a joke about it, those who came before you, those who, you know, had that sexual experience of reproduction, you know, being the reason for your physical experience, like you honor that just by honoring your now moment. So it ain't so much of like you always gotta be, that goes into it too on certain levels, as far as like the external honoring and saying certain things and posting certain things on social media and all that, but mainly it's like just you being the greatest version of you, you know what I'm saying? Because quantumly, your ancestors feel that, you know what I'm saying? Like that, because that's the key, you know what I'm saying? It's like on a quantum level, you're honoring and having reverence, you know, by you starting that business. It don't matter if you never say, you know, this, that, or the third about your ancestors on social media. Like the fact that you showing up and being the change that you want to see and doing your best to, live a life where your authenticity could, come forth, like that's honoring your ancestors, you know what I'm saying? Looking at more ways to embrace sovereignty and being free, that's honoring your ancestors, so whether you look at yourself as, and that's a whole different thing, and not to get caught up in the duck season, rabbit season of this, but definitely understanding like, hey, everybody in America that's melanated don't come from slavery, don't come from Africa in that sense of it, and also honoring the fact that, like you had melanated people, indigenous people in the U.S. already, you know what I'm saying? But again, like no matter whether it's, the indigenous, quote unquote, American aspect or the, the slave from Africa aspect, either one, it's like still honoring, the aspect of being free. You feel me? But just want to tap in a little bit to, the aura hygiene, because, two different things, like looking at it like holistically and not just the whole like surface level aspect of it. Get it? Like I felt like this could go a little deeper and help for you to get like even a deeper understanding about auric field health. And the two main things, like the differences that came to me, because I'm looking at solutions, that's the main thing. Like I know sometimes we have moments of like, like a sound bite or like a quick little epiphany of like, hey, what I want to share with people, pointing out, in some cases, like pointing out a certain problem or a certain thing that we need to address, you know and doing so without a solution. Sometimes that happens. I got videos where I bring up a certain thing without necessarily presenting a solution in that video. But ultimately, you know, I do have videos that speak to solutions, because I feel like, again, I jokingly posted that on Instagram. I'm like, like some of those spiritual videos that be like, I'm like, the nature of them be like, I'm gonna scare the fuck out of you by talking about all these different scary things about spirituality, and I ain't even gonna give you no solution. Like, I'm gonna throw you in this pool of fear mongering about, like, hey, if you do this, this means that your soul is cursed forever. All right, bye. It's like, what the fuck? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what type of spirit they connecting with? Are they on with that type of, sharing of the insight? You know, it's like, you gotta have some solution. If you're gonna point out, like I always say, like, if you're gonna point out there's a monster in my closet, at least tell me how to, like, face that monster, or like, what should I do? You know what I'm saying? If I find a monster in my closet, instead of like, hey, 5 signs you got a monster in your closet. Ding, 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 and all right, bye. It's like, what? It's like, what the fuck? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, are you really here to help me? You must be, one of those spirits that's meant to facilitate, hellish type of energies. You know what I'm saying? Like, to, you know, uh, cause again, and that shout out to that little, film session video I did connected to, I think it's called The Dragon Prince. And not the recent video, but another one where it was talking about, like, sharing truth with people. And it's like, and I had to learn that too, because I was one of those ones that's like to just share the truth, like, bam, you need to know this. But it's like being, tactful with the way you share certain truths, because ultimately, you have to ask yourself why you share the truth. And I share the truth to be helpful. I don't share the truth just because I just want to share the truth. Like, here, this truth, bear this shit. Like walking with a cross on your back. It's like, no, I want when I share the truth. And if it is gonna be like a strong truth, a deep truth, or quote unquote heavy truth, I'm also gonna share how you could lighten your load with that truth. You know what I'm saying? And not just like throw something on you. You know what I'm saying? But it's like that truth of, like, or should I say again, like, sharing the truth. There was like, you could share the truth, but you gotta know when to share it, because you could be sharing a truth that's too heavy for that person at the moment. And now you just kind of almost like, like crippling that person with that truth, instead of like lifting them up. Instead of like helping them to spiral up, you kind of then just like, here this bag, here this other bag. You know what I'm saying? It's like, come on. So, solutions with auric field health. And I realized the two different, and not saying these the only two, but I'm like, mainly it seems like you got like scientific. So one aspect of solutions with auric field health was like scientific chemistry, like where there's a certain science to it, meaning like things that go straight to affecting the electricity and magnetism in your body, whether it's physical or subtle body. It's like, all right, just scientifically helps electricity or magnetism. And again, in most cases, this could be like certain types of herbs, crystals, or metals, minerals, elements, food, fruits, vegetables, or meat if you're a meat eater. You know what I'm saying? And then also like grounding, like that's a scientific way to help your energy field. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a science to you grounding in essence, you know. And also which just kind of connects with grounding, but like also connecting with a tree, you know, or just being outside in nature. And then also like sound, like using tuning forks, like that's like a scientific aspect of helping your aura. And then you have like the root cause of a symptom in essence. And what I mean, like with a root cause of symptom when dealing with your aura, it's like things related to a psychological and spiritual, approach. And it's dealing with a psychological and spiritual, quote unquote, damage or trauma. So you may have certain psychological or spiritual damage or trauma that ain't necessarily like, oh, just use these tuning forks or do this. Is like that type of auric health deals with you. That approach is like either doing like visualizations, talking to your inner child, you know, doing some type of astral travel or astral journey or like lucid dreaming, or doing certain chakra meditations where you visualize your chakras, or it could be, other things that's not so scientific. Again, it's like not scientific of like, oh, just apply this shungite to your energy field and that helps the electromagnetism. It's like, it's stuff like, hey, apologize to yourself or apologize to that person, or you know what I'm saying, like it's like stuff like that where it's not necessarily like, on a deeper level it's a science to it, but it's more so like a psychological or spiritual aspect. So you got like a straight up scientific thing to apply, and then you got like a psychological spiritual thing that you could apply, you know and you have those different types of things. And again, the main importance of like auric field health, is the fact from my approach, what I'm saying, like again, like I don't look at the external as something to blame for when I go through things. Yeah, somebody external might be tied to a certain situation or things of that nature, but I ultimately see it as all me. It's like my auric field health, because if I got like a chakra leakage or a hole in my aura, that's me needing to just, strengthening, me needing to strengthen my auric field, and not necessarily somebody else to blame. Like I feel like, oh, my aura should be stronger, that way, no matter what somebody thinks of me, says of me, no matter how much harm something, wishes of me, if my aura is strong, what I'm saying, like I'm straight, what I'm saying, ultimately, like that's the key, And with certain scientific aspects, for one, you got like the cleansing cleansing parasites, and cleansing parasites also goes into cleansing like heavy metals from the system, and one of the things I know of like cleansing heavy metals is chlorella and cilantro, which is real good for cleansing heavy metals out of the system. Because in essence, one of the things I learned about, the parasites, I learned this, matter of fact, shout out to, much love to KT, the Arc Degree, he mentioned about like, parasites, in the stomach and the guts, feeding off of heavy metals. So it's like, all right, if you take away its food, and that essence of it, then, it's harder for it to feed, and then on deeper levels, also seeing, and I think I made a post about that, like, also seeing how clove, like you got the wormwood and the black walnut to kind of like, unalive the parasites, what I'm saying, on that level. And then clove comes to unalive the little eggs, before they hatch as well, what I'm saying, because you might unalive the actual parasites themselves, but the eggs sitting there and about to hatch after those ones that just, transition, you know, after they transition, it's like, all right, some new eggs opening up, you know what I'm saying? So it's like doing that full cleanse on that level, you know. But again, cleansing out the parasites, and the carbon aspect, and that goes into shungite as well. But then also, like, when you got like the medicinal charcoal, that might be in like toothpaste and different stuff, that you could use as a supplement, you know what I'm saying? That's why that works in essence, because it's like it's like cleansing, and again, cleansing those parasites on the stomach level prevents you from giving in to external parasitic type of energies, you know what I'm saying? Because I find that when I'm like taking shungite, you know what I'm saying, or like I'm taking shungite when I'm wearing shungite, you know what I'm saying, I have that energy to like, just be real clear, like steer away from like certain type of energies or certain type of situations when I got like my shungite on. So more scientific chemistry solutions, chemistry of clothing, now, this doesn't necessarily mean that, you got to make sure all your clothes is hemp. But there is a thing with hemp, and hemp clothing. It might seem like the old hippy dippy, like, oh, namaste, this and that, you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's the cool thing about it is like, like you do have to like question that shit first, to make sure it ain't no airy fairy, like, oh, you know what I'm saying, type of shit, but it's like, nah, it is something to wearing, like the harem pants and this and that, but stuff made of hemp. Hemp does have a healthy quality for the aura. And as of recently, making sure that like I eliminate polyester from out of like my closet, like, you know what I'm saying? Of course, because some of us still, have either, certain clothes that we really, really like that might have a little polyester in it, you know what I'm saying? Because, a lot of us like to have, like to dress fly, you know what I'm saying? Stuff like that, So you may still have some stuff with polyester in it, but it's like, the polyester, and matter of fact, polyester, like I didn't realize that till recently, like polyester is just basically like plastic, melted down to be like, become like threads, and it's, basically like woven plastic. And I'm like, like that ain't, what I'm saying, that ain't the business, you know what I'm saying? So, chemistry of clothing, wearing hemp, and then also, cotton, 100% cotton. That's what I look for if I'm not wearing hemp. It's like, just something that's 100% cotton. Like I don't want no 20% polyester, even 10%. I don't want 1% polyester, honestly. But, it's like looking to have the chemistry of the clothing on point. You know what I'm saying? That's definitely key, So when starting off, you may not be as fly. You won't be able to wear that fly jacket that you be wearing in the wintertime, you know what I'm saying, son? You got the fresh jacket, you know what I'm saying, son? For the wintertime, you're gonna have to wear the hippy dippy hip, jacket, at first, but, shout out to the fact, and this also kind of promotes us promoting each other in the sense of, they're having more people that's creating clothing, like more entrepreneurs, more people starting their businesses up that is making clothes out of 100% cotton or hemp and things of this nature. You even got people that got the grounding slippers where they got almost like grass and copper like in the shoes, you know what I'm saying? And to each his own on, again, it should be about the energy and not just because it looks like I'm being spiritual by wearing these shoes, Like again with Rude Rakshas, like I don't wear Rude Rakshas because it looks spiritual. Like I like the way Rude Rakshas feel on my aura, especially when I'm kind of in that vibe of like exercise and then being a little more active. I feel like my recovery on a muscular level and just energetically, especially also doing like qigong and tai chi. It just feels on point. Meditate. It's not so I could look like I'm somebody's guru, or you know like I know everything about the universe, or you know what I'm saying. It's the energy of it. So again, science of pure energy, vibration and environment. So grounding, hugging a tree, being in nature, less Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. You know what I'm saying? Although I wear my Bluetooth little speakers, like there's moments where, like, if I'm not listening to something, I automatically turn them off. You know what I'm saying? It's like less of that is possible. You know, when I go to sleep at night, I'm turning off the Wi-Fi setting and Bluetooth setting on my phone and putting my phone a little further away from me. You know what I'm saying? Like things like that, help the aura. And it's and a lot of this is from experience. Like I notice, like when I'm outside in nature a lot, you know, like I feel like for one, it's a cleansing my aura and strengthening my aura. And then also I find that like it's such a strong connection, I feel like, to my ancestors on certain levels, because I find that like when I'm grounding a lot, then I start to attract those, the type of beings that have a problem with me connecting with my ancestors. Just put it like that, you know what I'm saying? Like they start to kind of show up a little bit, in certain ways. It's like, all right, I must be strengthening, especially, as a masculine, like when you're embracing your masculinity and you're embracing that energy of like not going alone to get along. Doesn't mean that everywhere you go you're just like a ruffian and disrespectful, you know what I'm saying? Because there's a toxic aspect to that energy too, of like, oh, I'm God, nigga, so everything, I disrespect a nigga, if you know what I'm saying. Like when it gets into that space, it's like, that you just being like a foul being, in that sense. Of course we go through our growths, and some people, got to go through that, what I'm saying, energy enough of times. Again, that's what lesson loops exist for. So you ain't got to worry about, pushing no lessons onto nobody. They gon', everybody got their own learning process and learning system, to where they get like the balance of how to honor your ancestors and honor the fact that you are source on the human experience, or quote unquote God on the human experience, or goddess on the human experience. Like learn how to honor that, but in a manner that's respectful. You know what I'm saying? So continuing with the science of pure energy, also breathing tech, breath tech, or breathing technology, you know what I'm saying? Like the oxygen flow and the pranayama breathing, you know what I'm saying? That's also important, like when you taking those deep breaths, being in areas again with a lot of oxygen, that's very key. I brought up the cleansing the parasites aspect, and then you also got the herbs, and the herbs more so, that's adaptogens. Adaptogens are basically like the herbs, or you could say herbs are plants that's more based on like stress relief. I think of rhodiola rosea and ashwagandha. Man, rhodiola rosea, that's my new like thing I stand by. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, man, rhodiola rosea is like the truth. You know what I'm saying? Like I joke, I'm like, along with like, breathing techniques and, certain things to like calm my energy, or more so like bring my energy into a space where it's like, it could be calm in chaotic situations. I'm like, man, along with the rhodiola rosea, it's like, man, somebody could pull out a big bazooka and shoot it, quote unquote, without me like seeing them about to do it. Like somebody behind me could just boom with a big bazooka, and I don't even, you know what I'm saying, like flinch. It's like, it's that kind of calming to the nervous system on that level. You know what I'm saying? And again, the electricity and magnetism aspect, and the heart and the brain connected to electricity and magnetism. And with crystals, you got trigonal crystals, and that's your quartz and tourmaline. Quartz and tourmaline is piezoelectric because that has something to do with the trigonal crystal system, the trigonal crystal structure, which causes quartz and tourmaline to be piezoelectric, so tapping in with the quartz and the tourmaline, is definitely helpful. Lodestones, that's the magnetic aspect, and lodestones also, with it being iron and kind of, like it has like that strong grounding factor, and it's magnetic. You know, you got iolite and hyperstein. I brought up those when it comes to having a mixture of magnesium and iron. And magnesium, again, I done did the videos about magnesium being healthy, to the nervous system, because I brought up serpentine and pneumite out of, those two crystals having like one of the highest levels of magnesium, you could say. I don't know if the proper way to say it is molecules or atoms, but it has the highest, like when you're looking at the little chemistry, like Mg, 7CO, like basically the chemistry right out, I noticed that serpentine and pneumite has like a high number of magnesium atoms in its little chemistry, also labradorite, is known to be great for the auric field, and labradorite, not only the rainbow, like the little flashing of colors, because that also goes into, certain opals, but, labradorite is a type of feldspar. It's more so not it just being a feldspar, but it's structure, it's crystal structure, it's geometry. Because that also, you see why geometry kind of is like so big when it comes to spiritual aspects. The geometry of the crystal structure of labradorite has more of like an insulating or insulation type of energy, so it kind of like insulates the aura, on that level. You also got amber, when it comes to the electricity aspect, and opal. I've seen mentions of it. I'm still kind of like, paying attention to how it feels in my auric field. But opal is said to embody, it promotes constructive wave interference. And, if you've been around, I've been doing those videos for the longest and always referencing Dan Winters. Again, you're going to hear me bring up Dan Winters a lot in this because, again, like he breaking down the scientific connection while connecting it with the spiritual aspect, but constructive wave interference, is what opals are said to promote in the auric field. And that also goes for pine cones, because what more so though with the pine cones, and I brought up like ammonite, our shells, but anything are if on a plant level, succulents. So having anything that embodies the phi ratio, and I forgot the name of that vegetable, but they got a certain little vegetable that has like that little phi ratio spiral in it. If you eat that, that's putting that phi ratio into your body, and it's harmonizing, your auric field, But pine cones, like having pine cones in your room or around you, like that would be helpful. Pine cone oil, because they do have pine oil, and I just thought of like, some old, hood vibes, that's probably why a lot of folks, I don't know, with some of that stuff, it has so many chemicals in it that, it may not have nothing natural in it per se. But, I just think of the whole pine saw thing, cleaning up with pine saw, that probably was a thing because of that, without us knowing. Or with us knowing on a deeper level, but without us consciously learning that, hey, using pine saw because of the pine cones and the science of constructive weight, not knowing all of that, but, it still was there on some level, because of that connection. Also, bathing or spiritual baths, again, using certain herbs or crystals and your spiritual baths, say spiritual bath, but a certain, levels of salt, you know, again, salts or crystals, uh, and even now I gotta check out, much love to Seven Bomar. I ain't tried it yet, but he got like the hydrogen bath bombs, and hydrogen is a whole connection with that. Dan Winters get into the whole, thing with hydrogen and how that's, helpful to our auric field, you know, because again, it's not just one of these factors. I feel like, you know, from observation over the years, I find that people like to, whether they knowingly do it or not, what I'm saying, it's like promote just their way of doing things is the best way. you know like I've seen very like people who like strong on the shadow work and diving deep into the underworld vibes, like forget those crystals and that airy fairy stuff. It's all about the shadow work, this, that, or the third. And again, I'm bringing up both of those aspects. Again, like I say, you got the root cause of the symptom way of healing your aura, and you got the scientific aspect. You know what I'm saying? So you got like the shadow work meditations and stuff like that, because that's also a thing too. Like the auric field might be being compromised because of a lack of, what I'm saying, accepting a certain energy internally. Like you got a problem, you're either resentful towards yourself or somebody else, or you're not wanting to accept a certain weakness or characteristic about yourself, you know what I'm saying? Like that cause your aura to kind of like be weakened, because in essence, that's a certain emotional state, and especially certain, let's say, lower vibrational emotions that if you allow for them to become stagnant, or you stay in that vibrational state for a long time, that affects your aura. The whole reason why, again, like if you super sad for multiple time, for a long time, you're opening yourself up, again, because it's like I done made that connection too. It's like, and not to say high or low is bad or good, but it's like the more your auric field is, unhealthy, the more something could like latch on to you, from the dimension. Because again, being in a certain emotional state, in essence, is like being in a certain dimension. When you're in a certain mental state, it's like being in a certain dimension. And when you dial into that dimension or that radio station, when you tune into that radio station, there's other beings, entities on that radio station, what I'm saying, looking to align with you. And again, is not to externalize it, like, like it's like you just need to make sure that you on point, what I'm saying, with your health. And because the moment you get lost into the sauce of the like, oh, it was because of them or that bad situation in the past or this and that, you kind of indirectly, subtly putting yourself in the victim mode and this and that, just like, it's better to be, on the accountable tip. And I brought up breath health already, but then also, blood health, the health of the blood. And that also goes into the dandelion root or dandelion leaf or burdock root, what I'm saying, things of that nature, milk thistle, that helps for the purification of the blood, because after a dandelion tea, like I could sense less of a sugar craving, it's like, it's almost like it disappears, quite literally. Like I could tell that only if my mind, like if I'm being weak-minded in that moment, that's the only way I would give in to wanting that sugary treat or whatever it is because I'm just like choosing to give into it, because it's more so like a mental habit. It's like mentally, when I have this coffee, I want this sugary treat. But like when taking dandelion root, it's like, I just want my coffee. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't need the, you know what I'm saying? So the dandelion helps on that level as well. And that goes into the old videos I did on blood bending. You know, them lives I done about like 2 or 3 years ago. I want to say it was like 2023 or 2022. You know, I was talking about a lot of blood bending and things connected to blood. You know, and then just recently I did like the video about like, you know, how the soul, the blood and iron, like how there was always some type of significance in all kind of cultures when it comes to like the importance of like, you know, the iron, the blood, and in essence the liver, you know, because the liver is one of the most iron dense, you know, organs in the body. So you have that. And as I brought up salts earlier, salts in, I don't know if I'm saying it right, halides, but halides are like basically like a fluoride is a halide. I know that much, you know, or more so like fluorine, I should say, you know, but that's why fluoride, and I mentioned fluoride, like especially like during like strong, you could say like strong full moon transits, you know, where the emotions is up, you know what I'm saying? Like fluorite is a great crystal, you know what I'm saying? Because it helps for you to kind of have clarity about what's your energy, you know, on a personal level and what's not, you know. But, you know, ultimately, you know, the two aspects of oral hygiene, as far as applying solutions, you could either solutions from a scientific perspective or apply solutions from a root cause of symptoms. And again, the root cause of symptoms, that's like the psychological or spiritual aspect to, you know, helping your aura. So, because again, either or, you know, like if you doing the shadow work, this, that, or the third, but you're constantly eating garbage and not using healthier herbs, stuff like this, then, you know, it's like, all right, you good on the psychological, spiritual side because you're doing the shadow work and the meditations, going inside yourself, the visualizations, this, that, or the third. Are you like doing the journaling for the emotional processing, stuff like that? But you know, what you're consuming on other levels is garbage. And consumption also goes into like constantly looking at the computer screens. I brought up Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, stuff like that, you know, but consumption on all levels. And then on the other tip, you could be like, oh, I got the shungite crystal, and you know, and I take this herb and I eat only vegan food. I'm a vegan, you know. I eat the finest of berries and, you know, this, that, or the third. But then, you know, you got an emotional blockage that just keeps plaguing, or you got like a certain level of shadow work that needs to be done, you know, and things of that nature, you know. So it's like, all right, it's both of those things, that holistic, you know. And I'm never going to tell you what to do, because I just always like to be on point about that, you know. But I would suggest to not, again, like I've seen people like, oh, you know, that crystal stuff, man, you know what I'm saying, you need to do some shadow work, you know, like that's the solution or that's the only way. And it's like, and for some of us, let's just say it like this, some of us have the type of mentality where, you know, you hear something like that, so you like, well, shit, man, forget them crystals then. You know, I ain't gonna work with no crystals no more. I ain't gonna even worry about eating healthy. It's like, no, you still keep that, like, that's their perspective on it. But still, you know, if you align with crystals, still do your thing. And just be aware that that ain't the only thing. You know what I'm saying? You know, like, that's the key. You know, and again, and knowing yourself, like study your numerology, study your natal chart. You know what I'm saying? Don't overly externalize the situation where it's like, oh, you know, because of this planetary alignment or the full moon, this and that, that's why. It's like, you know, like, yes, it does have some type of energetic, you know, relevance and influence, but, Don't go extreme on it. You feel me? But that's the key. And again, like, also just a few little things, with like how you could like peep game if there is something like dealing with your aura that maybe you need to, for one, just the energy. Like, I feel like even if you're tuned into this video, it may be a sign to, like, make sure that you stand on point with the aura, or you just needed one gem, from the video about, you know, the health of your aura. But like difficulty maintaining focus or being scattered, that could mean like your auric field could possibly be, what I'm saying, a little weakened, because you're kind of feeling, you probably got a hole somewhere, and certain things just keep, you know, penetrating through your aura so much to where, it's hard for you to tell what's you and what's the environment. you know uh Increased sensitivity and overwhelm could possibly mean, that auric field, one of, possibly, because again, as I say these things, it's multiple things that could be connected to sensitivity and overwhelm, but one of the things possibly could be, like, all right, strengthening the auric field, you know in extreme behaviors as it relates to characteristics to particular chakras, so like extremely, like basically like with each chakra. So like with the root chakra, if you're extremely worried about money, extremely in survival mode and stuff like that, then maybe you need, maybe there's something, with the root chakra area that you need to like cleanse and strengthen, what I'm saying? Or you know, if you're too extreme with your compassion and you're just like, I'm open and just everything and hug everybody, no boundaries, or the other extreme, what I'm saying, of like closed off and I can't trust this, can't trust that, can't trust this, can't trust that, closed off, what I'm saying? Like, then that may be a sign, what I'm saying? So, and then also the difference of like, handling certain things with certain crystals. You got like your energetic or psychic debris, so like you got like debris from like debris, quite literally, is like, all right, like it's the aftermath, so you may be done with that attachment or remove your attachment to something, but there's still some debris in your auric field, you know what I'm saying? Because quite literally, I feel the difference again, like when I'm cleansing myself and doing certain healthily things, I'll get around something that once triggered me strongly, and it's tough for it to trigger me on a high level, because I done cleanse my auric field, like I done cleanse my aura and my physical body of that little energetic debris, so it has nothing to relate to, because it's also like a relating energy. Like, if that little traumatized emotion still stuck around my solar plexus or my spleen chakra, and something related to that trigger or that trauma or whatever kind of comes around me, is way easier for that trigger to to happen. Again, it's not the external aspect that's just a trigger, it's really you know what I'm saying? But with energetic debris, I find that like cleaning leftover energy, and I'm just, it's not going through a long list, but selenite, is a great crystal, for like cleansing out the energetic debris, kind of get your little, Reiki visualization, or Reiki or Qigong, because it's about visualizing the energy, like closing your eyes and seeing, like you removing things out of the aura. Also, blue kyanite, is good for, the removal of energetic or psychic, quote unquote, debris. That's cleansing the mental body, the all aspects of the subtle body, the mental body, emotional body, you know what I'm saying? Things of that nature. And then you got like stagnant energy cleansers. So this is more so not dealing with debris, but if you kind of get stagnated in a certain energy and things kind of feel blocked up, you know what I'm saying, on that level, like a tiger's eye, garnet, citrine, carnelian, sunstone. But basically, like with stagnant energy, you know, you need to catalyze a flow of vitality, and those are the types of crystals that kind of, you know, trigger that, or trigger that vitality, or a catalyst for that vitality, you know, to be, you know, implemented. But we're gonna slow down that. Let me tap in with a little Q&A vibe. But yeah, much love to everybody, and as always, appreciate y'all, you know, sharing the little insights. Say black is illegal, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, like again, Gene Frazier mentioned black is illegal status, you know, like, you know, the full circle, like when you're sharing something and you want people to like really just get it without having to over explain, like, yeah, sometimes you use terminologies like, you know, black people, a black person, this, that, or the third, but ultimately, you know, it's like if we keep on perpetuating some of these things, then, you know, it stays, you know what I'm saying? So it's like kind of switching up the vocab, you know, because again, like, you know, from videos and then out and about, you know, it's like I see a person, you know, and they look like my kinfolk from down the street, but they quote unquote from India, you know what I'm saying, or from the Philippines, you know what I'm saying, look like so and so from out of the trap, you know what I'm saying, like, you know, the kinfolk, you know what I'm saying, from around the corner, but, you know, from Mexico, or, you know what I'm saying, like stuff like that, you know. So it's like, man, that whole black thing be kind of throwing it off, you know, a little bit, you know. So yeah, most definitely. But any questions before I go? And I might just, you know, stay for a little second, talk about a few things, you know, because one thing that's been coming up, you know, is like understanding and acknowledging, like, hey, you know, like the whole advancement of like technology from the perspective of like computers and robots and stuff like that, like, you know, like acknowledging, like, man, that's a real thing, you know what I'm saying, like that's something, you know, to you know, understand that you have to start embracing and preparing to be in a world that's going to have more robots, you know, whether it's robots in law enforcement and robots and this and that, you know what I'm saying, like a cashier in the store, you already got that, you know. At the University of Arizona, you know, they got like the little robots that deliver things to people, you know, and that creates a whole different, you know what I'm saying, social and spiritual dynamic, you know what I'm saying, within the realm. And, you know, like being able to honor and embrace that, you know, also, you know, being aware of the cryptocurrency thing, you know, that's coming up a lot, you know, it's like, you know, tapping into the cryptocurrency realm, and, you know, understanding the changes with funds that's going to be coming up, you know. And again, a balance, you know, it's like the acceptance of AI being in this realm, but doesn't mean that you put that before your, natural psychic abilities and your natural, you know, uh, connection, your internal connection, on a clairvoyant, psychic, spiritual level, you know. At the same time, it's like embracing that energy, because like here it is where you got one or two options. I could either shoot myself in the foot in the sense of like being like, oh no man, I'm completely against you know technology, this and that, you know what I'm saying, like, but then man, I gotta get the bag and I gotta, you know what I'm saying, gotta do this, gotta do that, but it takes technology to do that, you know what I'm saying? So it creates like a contradiction. It's like you're shooting yourself in the foot, you know, like unless you really, really about that, like, you know, and that's cool. Like if you genuinely on that, like off grid, like none of that shit type of energy, then cool, tap into that, you know. But it's like, embracing that connection, you're seeing more and more of that. Like you go to Google something and the Google suggesting something that you was thinking about earlier, and it's like, what in the fuck? Like how does the computer know, you know what I'm saying? How does the algorithm, you know, pick up on the fact that I was just thinking about that earlier, you know what I'm saying? Well, and that's where it get like, like, all right, it's here, it's a thing, you know what I'm saying? But like you ain't even search that on your phone or none of that. Like you ain't do none of that. You just probably thought of, man, let me download or let me check out this information, or I've been thinking about doing this, and then bam, you go to research or something. And that's also in essence connected to the Jinn energy on certain levels too, you know what I'm saying? Because the Jinn, like the smokeless flame, the electrical energy, you know like certain things moving through the technology, you know what I'm saying? And I used to say that on a simple level way back, you know, because again, when I bring up the whole thing about Jinn, it ain't like no, oh, all Jinn is bad or all Jinn is good. It's like it's Jinn that operate on different levels, and I'm just using Jinn for lack of a better word, you know. But I brought up like the whole thing with like seeing like quote unquote synchronistic numbers like 333 and 444 and this and that, but you seeing it on your phone or on something that's like a part of technology, you know showing you that that's connected with it as well, you know what I'm saying? Like it's all intertwined, and you're gonna see more, more of that little meshing with the spiritual and technology aspect. You're gonna see it showing up a lot more, you feel me? So also being aware of that. I think that's it for the subjects that I wanted to mention. And I'm just gonna continue to drop certain things that's just like add more clarity to what has been shared already, and are bringing forth like it's gonna always have like a different or unique perspective, whether it's something that I may have brushed on before but I'm saying it different, or adding information to it, or having to take certain information away from it, depending on what the situation is, you know, because also, like, I've spoken to this on certain levels, but like with the crown chakra and, crown chakra, disembodied spirits, and also like the air element, and just basically demystifying the whole thing about, like, when they say like earth, heaven, in a lot of cases, heaven was like more so like a spiritual politicking type of thing of like the air spirits or sky spirits is considered to be heaven like. You know what I'm saying? But, it's deeper than that. Because I always see like this connection with, the color purple, but then also like with ghosts and stuff like that, because again, as much as you're tapping into, quote unquote higher self or inner self, as I like to say, tapping into, source energy. The crown is also tapping into, disembodied, spirits or air spirits, and hence having to say the affirmations and being on point with, your hygiene, and like, not romanticizing this stuff, you know what I'm saying, and having like a deep understanding about it, because again, it's constant learning, constant, spiraling up, growing up, constant learning, because there's still some things that's still like, like new, and I'm getting more awareness of, as you've seen recently, again, as I just brought up Jinn, like getting more awareness of the whole Jinn shadow twin, and then also kind of like a parasitic, vampiristic aspect of the, the shadow in certain ways, or the Jinn energy, and then even, as of recently, like realizing, like I was reading this book, it was called Spirits of Palestine, and it was bringing up basically like people and their stories about Jinn, and like their, people with different, whether it's under possession or just experiences with Jinn spirits. And one of the terminologies that's popular, or the way they say it in like that area around Palestine, there was like, that person is wearing a Jinn, or a Jinn is wearing them. And like instantly for me, it's like, oh shit, the anime called Kill La Kill, basic KILL, then a little dash LA, and then KILL, and it's about like these clothes that amplify, what I'm saying, your abilities, what I'm saying, and they got different levels of it, but like it has like this God thread in it, this thread like from the universe that is woven with, and some of the suits, like a 1-star suit, only have like 10% of God threads in it, then a 2-star suit might have like 30% of God threads, and it goes up. But then you got like these ones that's made completely out of God threads, and it's part of like the main character in the anime Kill La Kill, but like the suit that I forgot her name, but the main character, what she wears is black and red, and in order for her to connect with the suit, like it takes the blood, because quite literally how she found the suit was that she had cut her finger and the blood spilled into like the clothing, and that shadow, that clothes was like, oh man, you gotta wear me, put me on. And so seeing like that terminology of like wearing a Jinn, or a Jinn wearing a person, that's the term they use for like, connecting like when there's a, in essence, like a possession with a Jin energy, and and then seeing like, all right, wearing, the what they call Goku suits in the Kill La Kill anime, and again, like those, the main character suit, what I'm saying, was like when she put it on, it was also like extracting the blood, and then they even had a point. I felt like this was kind of almost explaining, like, all right, to some extent, like shadow work type of energy, and preventing the shadow from being parasitic because you're doing the shadow work. Because again, that's also, again, goes back to the auric field thing. you know it's like it could be, you could feel drained because you're not fully integrating with the shadow, your internal shadow, and so it becomes almost like a back and forth type of energy. And again, like, and that even comes from the duality aspect. If you see your shadow, or a shadow in general, is all bad, you know due to subtle programming and stuff like that. So it's kind of like being tough to integrate, and it's becoming like a challenge. But in the Kill I Kill anime, basically, like, they had a moment where, because now this is just the anime being on this little, what I'm saying, little subtly, pervy vibes. But the suit was kind of skimpy, where it would like cause like more of the naked body to show, you know. And the main character kind of felt embarrassed about, like how most of her body was exposed when she wear the suit, you know what I'm saying, and kind of feeling some kind of way, this and that. But then she got to a point where she just kind of like, man, I don't give a fuck about how it, you know, like if it shows some of my nakedness, and there's a deeper level to that, like if it shows some of my nakedness, you know, because in essence, like, your nakedness is like, like when you talk about shadow work, like you embracing your weaknesses, and weaknesses could be seen as almost like being naked, like you ain't got no shield, you know. That also kind of taps into Urza on Fairy Tail, and why she feel like, comfortable. Like at a certain part in the show, like she would wear her shield and stuff, even if she was going to the beach. Like she wouldn't wear a bathing suit. She kept her armor on, you know what I'm saying? Because, that was a thing of not, embracing the vulnerability. And embracing vulnerability, that don't mean always just being super vulnerable in any and all environments, you know what I'm saying? Because that's where some of that extreme namaste shit could kind of, like, what I'm saying, be throwing things off. But, there is a level of vulnerability that, that has to be embraced. But again, like when she just kind of was like, forget it, fully embraced it, it was like she gained more power. So when she wear the suit, she would be able to be more powerful. She could wear the suit without, like, the suit didn't need to drink as much blood, so meaning that she wasn't being drained, you know what I'm saying, in like a weird paradoxical way. She wasn't being drained because of, her fully embracing the suit and fully wearing that suit, you know what I'm saying. In essence, like, like almost like, wearing your shadow in that sense of it. But, it's like as she fully embraced that, she became more powerful, you know, she was stronger, compared to like when she was a little embarrassed. Like the suit would have to suck so much of her blood, and then she was getting drained halfway through her battles and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying. It was like it's some deep stuff, but just touching a little bit on it, because I'm also gonna make a post on it on the Discord server, just showing the anime that I'm talking about and a few little notes on it. But I'm like, all right, that came up too, and that was pretty interesting. But that is it. And any questions before I go? As always, y'all know where to tap in with the jewelry on the Etsy shop, Epic Lifestyles, or you could go to Epic Lifestyles on Instagram if you're familiar with the process of ordering on that level. If you already done, ordered with me at some point before, it don't matter whether recent, long time ago, whenever, there's still 15% off, you know, for all those who have shopped, ordered something at least once or twice, you know, 15% off. That's automatically done on Etsy. So I'm saying that for those who order through Instagram, that's still going. The flash sale is done with, but you know, you have that. Also, any and all donations greatly appreciated. Donation links are at the first page, the home page on the YouTube channel, and in most cases underneath a lot of the videos I have the donation links. Any and all donations is greatly appreciated. But if there is no questions, we're gonna close it out. A second. Yeah, bringing it a little full circle before I close out. The Saturn retrograde in Pisces, so a lot of like Saturnian type of energy is coming up. For me, I know it's being like a hard-headed person. Stubborn in certain ways, because I understand like certain levels of being stubborn. It's not really being stubborn in a toxic way, like you're sticking to something that you're supposed to stick to. But then in other ways, it's like you blocking a blessing because you're being like hard-headed on a toxic level, and understanding that how that aligns for me, because with the Saturn energy, Saturn energy coming through, about the discipline, the structure, the routine, what's best, But with the Pisces energy, it's also asking to like pay attention to how you're, like being disciplined with your escapism, like whether it's drugs or whatever it is that you may use to escape, it's like pointing out that situation and how you need to, be more disciplined about that. So yeah, a lot of that Saturnian energy coming up. But again, there's other transits as well that's very important. And with Saturn energy, is about slowing things down. Like it also goes into the Bishi archetype. Bishi, I talked about the Turtle Island video. Go watch that if you want to have a deeper understanding about that. But like a turtle, like, and the earth in general, like, the earth, a turtle, like these things need to vibrate slower and move slower in order for there to have some form of quote unquote stability or quote unquote structure, or foundation, to stand on. And that also goes into the Pisces energy as well. Your foundation and what you stand on is your feet, the Pisces energy. And that's also connected to your grandparents, because you're, in essence, standing on the shoulders of your grandparents as far as like their deeds and stuff, what they done. You moving from their energy and where they left off, in essence, and that's coming up a lot too. Oh yeah, most definitely. You know what I'm saying? The discipline and energy, again, like paying attention to what house that, so like when something goes in retrograde, you know what I'm saying, paying attention to the house that it's in your natal chart. So with Saturn retrograding, is Saturn in your first house in your natal chart, or your seventh house, or your eighth house, 12th house, because that area of your life is going to be connected to that Saturn transit. And then also what where Saturn actually is, and then what houses have the zodiac sign that's related to Saturn. Because Saturn is ruling over Capricorn and Aquarius. Aquarius kind of, they have the whole little new thing with Uranus, but ultimately it's a Saturn thing. Like it's almost like the energy. Like, don't forget that Saturn rules Aquarius. You know what I'm saying? And I got like connections with that too. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not gonna go deep into you know as far as like Saturn and the connection to Varuna from the Vedic texts and waters. You know, and no coincidence that both signs that Saturn rule is connected to water in certain ways. They're not water signs, but they're connected to water. In the sense of like a Capricorn, the goat is also really a sea goat, because the glyph for Capricorn is like that little seven with the little goat, like the little mermaid tail, dipped in the water. You know what I'm saying? And then Aquarius, aqua, the water bearer. Of course, it is an air sign, but again, it's like both of the zodiac signs ruled by Saturn is connected with water, and we're in the Aquarius age. And Saturnian energy has, that the humanitarian aspect of the Aquarius age is what Saturn has a lot to deal with. you know so in essence, that's another thing, you might be seeing is like the Saturnian energy coming up a lot, because of also like the whole Aquarian age. you know yeah, the whole Uranus thing is part of it, but like it's like, hey, don't forget, like, before the whole Uranus thing, you know what I'm saying, it's like it's the Saturnian energy. you know the 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 main first planets that's mostly spoken of in mythologies. Hence why in Vedic astrology don't really deal with Pluto, Uranus, or Neptune. You know, it's Rahu, Ketu, aka North Node, South Node, and then the main other planets, what I'm saying, the Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Venus, Mercury aspect, what I'm saying, of course the moon and the sun, but it's those things. It's not, dealing with those outer planets as much. And again, like Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, what I'm saying. It was that humanitarian, taking care of the human aspect, because the human aspect is dealing with your bodysuit, your human experience, the 666 carbon, 6 neutrons, 6 protons, 6 electrons, like what you could do for that aspect of the realm. You know what I'm saying? And also though, remembering, because I feel like, to each his own on what planets that you favor, or what planetary energies that you align best with or favor most. But for me, I'ma always speak on the truer holistic aspect of it. One planet is not God of everything. Like Saturn is not the god of everything. Jupiter is not the god of everything. Mercury is not the god of everything. The moon is not. The sun is not. As much as, oh, the sun, stand in the sun and this and that. Because also that's why, like, I'm wearing shades a lot lately. It's like, like not only from the phone, but then also like, like I don't need too much external information. You know, Hence why, the insights come from, like it's insight, is internal, you know. And then you connect with the external, of course, because again, you incarnated in this realm in a human body that has eyes and could see the sun. So ultimately, if you didn't want that experience, you shouldn't have came into a human experience if you didn't want to deal with the sun. You feel me? And all these different external things, but at the same time, it's like a temperament, you know. Because again, the sun, not feeding too much into the eyes, and then also, you digesting consumption of the light with your eyes, consumption of the light through the stomach, because in essence, like, the stomach is breaking down more so the intestines, but the stomach, intestines, guts, breaking down the light from the food, you know what I'm saying, the information, you know what I'm saying. But the Aquarius vibe is definitely, again, a Saturnian thing, but one planet don't rule everything. Because I feel like there's still that subtle vibe of like, oh yeah, it's Saturn. Saturn. It's like, yeah, connect with Saturn, but it's like, that ain't all it is, you know what I'm saying? Hence why some of us who embrace that, like, that don't romanticize with one particular planetary body, we still kind of like the oddballs out a little bit in certain aspects, because there's still this energy of like, oh, it's all about the sun, it's all the moon, like the moon, man, you know what I'm saying, hollering at the moon, It's like, it ain't just one aspect, but it is important for you to understand what you resonate with, more. Now that's important, you know what I'm saying. And again, also keep saying it, like, the elements that resonate in your natal chart. Like, do you have more planets in fire signs, more planets in water energy, more planets in earth sign, more planet, you know what I'm saying? And I don't know if I mentioned that before, but like in Vedic astrology, you got your Atma Karka, but it's like the planet, the planet that other than, so in essence, in one form of astrology, you got the fact that, like, your ascendant sign is considered to be like the ruling planet of your natal chart. So like the most important planet of your natal chart is in essence considered to be the ruler of your ascendant sign. So if you're Aquarius rising, let's say for this example, Saturn rules your chart, in that essence. If for me, I'm a Cancer moon, so the moon rules my chart. So with a Cancer, I say Cancer moon, Cancer ascendant, and with the Cancer ascendant, and the moon rules in the chart, like, I have to be aware that, like, the moon changes quickly, so I got to be aware of my emotional temperament, and more so also not just emotions but thoughts, because the moon does deal with the thoughts and the air element just as much as it's the emotional thing, because it's more so that it affects the emotions, you know like the moon affects the waters, you know what I'm saying, but not necessarily water itself, because no coincidence again that Thoth, which is almost like thought, thought or Thoth deals with you know the mental aspect, because the subconscious mind, in essence, connected with the moon, the dreams, all that. That's a lot of mental stuff, just as much as it may be considered like to be an emotional thing, you know. But you see those temperaments and that connection. And that's what I was gonna say. See, finish that. The Atmakarka, the Atmakarka is the aspect of the planet So it's seeing like the planet that affects the chart the most being the planet that is to the furthest degree. So like if you got like a planet, whatever planet is like at the almost like close to the 30th degree mark, like whatever planet is closest to the 30th degree mark in whatever respective sign is in, so like planet, like if a planet is 28 degrees, and like that's the only planet that you have that's like that far in degrees, compared to like other planets you got that might be like 3 degrees or 15 degrees, Capricorn 15 degrees, Cancer, this or that. But the planet that like has the highest degree in the sense of like 28, 29 degrees, then that planet would be considered, that's the Atmakaka, that's the planet that would said to have the most influence in your chart as well. So whether you look at that perspective or the ascendant perspective, you know but it's like, like knowing these things, the more you know about yourself, because again, with the moon shifting, and that's where I went on that rant. But like the moon, and matter of fact, I think as just an example of it, the way I shifted that quickly, like, all right, wait, what I was just talking about? It was like, it's like that, shifting through the zodiac houses, very quickly, you know what I'm saying? And being aware of that. But yeah, we're gonna close out. Enjoy y'all now a moment. Be aware of the energy as we approach this, what it is, new moon in Virgo. Pay attention to what house that Virgo occupies in your chart, because that's what it's going to be highlighting, in connection with what the moon energy deals with. And it's the eclipse. So, making sure to be, embracing whatever energy is healthy for you to embrace at this moment. Because again, it's like, you help the collective by being aware of your unique energy. You know what I'm saying? Some people might need to add a little more salt to the dish they cooking up right now. Some people need to add a little more sugar. You know what I'm saying? Some people need to not add no more salt or no more sugar to whatever it is they do. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and the focal point again about to be, and I brought that up a while back, I think in that video I did on what was it called, because I think I brought up the nakshatra connected to Aries placement. But it was the video I brought up, Obsidian, Aries, I forgot the name of it. But anyway, a lot of, strong Aries energy coming up with Neptune in Aries and Saturn in Aries, two planets that move pretty slowly, you know what I'm saying, moving through Aries. So a lot of just, self-awareness coming up strongly, Uranus and Gemini, another slow mover, but yeah, we're gonna commence. Remember again, like the videos if you vibe with it. Subscribing is cool, but it's more so about the minutes watch, the likes, sharing, only if, again, you vibing with it. But that's also another way to support, because with the monetization, the minutes watch is more so like what goes into the monetization. So in essence, like, if you just if you don't want to donate, you know, just watch it, putting a video on and just letting it roll through, you know what I'm saying? You know, most of the cost is, you know, you having to charge your phone a little bit, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, that also goes into, you know, helping on the finances. Because again, like having to, you know, have that balance of speaking up in the sense of like, you know, with me looking to continuously not, you know, get no job and mainly do these things, you know, I have to like express like, hey, you know, it would be very helpful for, you know, the donations and things of this nature. But it can't, is a balance. Like I can't also be, you know, too extreme with that because I chose to share things on that level, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, I'm not gonna be out here like, man, y'all don't. It's like, nah, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know. And also with this, and I could, you know, leave on that note, because I also became aware, and that's why I do, you know, like whenever any chance I get, you know, like donating to, you know, the platforms or people that I vibe with, you know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, sending a little donation, you know, because that's a reflection of supporting, you know, myself in that sense of it too. It's like, you know, somebody starting up or doing a thing, you know what I'm saying? Like, I send that donation. You know, I can't expect for other people to do something that I'm not doing for others, you know what I'm saying, on that level too. And that's a key aspect, you know, that I've seen from experience, you know, as well. So something to, you know, be aware of. But now is the vibrate, y'all know what it is, not too far in the future, not too far in the past. Right now. Peace, y'all.